Well, thank you so much, Sanctuary, for joining us again for the My Church gathering. I'm so excited to present today a little bit more about a recent task force that we have put together. Again, my name is Pastor Rose, serve as Associate Pastor of Formation, and I am joined today with Dr. Nate Chobolo. And so we're excited to share a little bit about this task force that has recently um, um, been formed. So back in the early part of the summer, the elder board asked Andrea Lee and I to co-lead a task force that would help us in our church um, begin to create and implement a phased reopening plan for our church in the season of COVID-19. And so Andrea and I have gathered an incredible team, including Dr. Nate Chobolo, Elder Vida Kent, Jim Koch, and Alana Hankston. And all of these committee members bring incredible experience and perspective and gifts to this task force. So we're really excited just to share a little bit about what this task force has been up to, share some information with the church, and then ways that you can inform this process together as a community. So you'll see here the purpose of our task force. So this task force was gathered together, was formed for the purpose of developing and implementing a phased reopening approach to best ministry practices during this time of COVID-19. And some of the intended outcomes of this task force, first is to develop a system and also a process for us to safely and effectively continue ministry during COVID-19, because while we aren't meeting in person right now, ministry is still happening here at Sanctuary in North Minneapolis. And second, to also collaborate with our elders, our staff, and you, our congregation members, on the plan development of what this phased reopening approach looks like, as well as the implementation of it. So we are only successful as a task force when we all join together in the phases that we've outlined. So we'll get to share and unveil some of that with you today. But before we made any decisions as a task force, we wanted everything that we did to be informed by our core values as a church. And these are core values that supersede, COVID-19. These are core values of who we have always been and who we continue to seek to be as a church community. So you can see, first and foremost, we are an urban, multi-ethnic church, and we are intentionally planted in North Minneapolis. We also seek to be a diverse church in a diverse community. We are called to serve our community, which is a vulnerable population, both before COVID as well as certainly right now. And we are an intergenerational church. We are focused on the thriving of all age groups, from the youngest to the oldest. And finally, we are a family. We are a family who does life together, we worship together, we fellowship together and eat together. We share our lives together in many ways. And so these are our core values that informed our task force in this work ahead of us.
Thank you, Pastor Rose. So for those who don't know me, I'm Dr. Nate Chobolo. I'm a pediatrician and internist in Park Nicollet and Brooklyn Center. Been a member of Sanctuary for about 6 years. I've been going to Sanctuary for about, close to 10 years now. And my wife, Jenny, and son, Chari, and I, we live in Northeast Minneapolis. And so I was asked to join this, given my background professionally, and really was looking forward to joining to kind of blend my professional expertise and knowledge in dealing with families and some of the challenges they deal with day to day, along with the knowledge of what is needed from a public health standpoint, and what is some of the different risks and strengths that our communities have and so that we could come up together with a plan that made sense to bring us together as much as possible, but also keep us safe. And so this, you can see right here, is an outline that is really modeled after the state's COVID-19 response, which is the metaphor of a dial. And as we go through different stages, both of information we get as a church and information we are seeing from state officials, county officials, and our community members, we'll be able to kind of either go forward or backwards on that dial in response to the dynamic environment that COVID-19 has presented us. And so this work and this task force has really been informed by recommendations from the Minnesota Department of Health, the CDC, the American Academy of Pediatrics, as well as some nationwide Christian and other faith-based organizations on how do we gather together safely. And so we'll go through each phase now next and try to give you a kind of a high-level overview of what that looks like. So phase one is where we previously were when we first had the lockdown, and the kind of shelter-in-place orders were put in force, and that's really that everything was online. All worship, all ministry was online. There wasn't really any gathering, and that's a potential as we see how the COVID-19 pandemic unfolds. There has been talk about potential having second spikes and having to dial back, and so it's potential that we might have to return to this phase at some point. Phase two is where we currently are, and this is that we have all online worship, and then there's some approved small group in-person ministries, so some life groups that are starting to meet. And we'll talk a little bit about across all the phases that there's different steps that we'll need to be observing to keep everyone safe. But at this point, there are some small group in-person ministries meeting, but we're online, worship is an online-only experience. So phase three, we continue to have an online worship experience. We have those small in-person ministries, and then we can talk about having more mid-size in-person meetings. And this is really kind of going along with some of the recommendations from the state level that have talked about slow increase of gatherings. And it's also kind of informed by what is the activity like, in Hennepin County, in Minneapolis, and amongst our community and congregation members. Phase four is starting to plan and implement one indoor service with limited pre-registered attendance. And so a lot of the best ways to kind of control spread is having people kind of designate when they're coming, and so that we're not having a whole crunch of people showing up at once. And then this will be done alongside a live stream option as well, again, to continue to provide that connection to members who might be high risk, or have other reasons why they're just not yet comfortable coming in person for service, or just because of our limited capacity, because even in this setting, we're going to try to socially distance, but we won't be able to attain the full capacity that the church building provides. Phase five is moving from that one service, which really allows our staff to get a better idea of the kind of day-to-day service-to-service functions that need to be done to have a successful service, to have a safe service. And once there's been some, time to adjust and plan for that and kind of know where we might face some glitches and how to navigate them, then it's really feeling like it's fair to our staff and to our community members to have and move to 2 indoor services. And again, there will continue to be this live stream option for those who again, are either high risk or just uncomfortable coming and having fellowship in that setting. And then phase 6 is a return to the full capacity attendance, 2 Sunday worship services. And this is kind of getting as close as we can back to understanding what things were like before COVID-19 hit. We all understand that our ways of life may change and probably will change forever going forward, but this is kind of coming back to service and connection and fellowship like we have experienced over the history of Sanctuary. And so this is a strong start to our phase reopening plan, but our task force is going to continue to work on logistics as we get more information. Each phase is going to have a set of prescribed safety requirements, things like required mask usage, particularly in concordance with state mandates or any other local mandates, things like temperature checks, and also talking about not sharing of food or drinks. One of the highest ways to potentially spread COVID-19 has been singing and kind of forceful breathing, and so we're really mindful of when what the community settings and the settings as far as local spread, as far as treatments or vaccines come along. There are lots of things that will go into determining when singing is going to be something that we can join in together in closed space. But those are some of the set safety requirements across each phase. And then we're going to continue meeting and making recommendations to the elder board based on the current conditions and these state guidelines. And again, keeping and holding our church values in line with that. And then once it's decided to move to another phase, this will be communicated to the congregation. And then lastly, it's important to note that we're really mindful, the task force members are all very mindful about how we can best create policies and procedures that not only keep us safe, but continue to be welcoming to our members and the community surrounding us, and really thinking about what the values are and the vision is for Sanctuary and how we can do that even in this difficult time of COVID-19.
Well, thank you, Dr. Nate. I really appreciate that. You've brought a very needed perspective and expertise to our task force. So it's so helpful to have your voice included in this task force. So thank you for that. But I also want to share, Sanctuary, what this means practically for ministry, and to share just some encouragement in this time, because it has been a while now that we have had to distance, that we've had to be online for worship, and it's hard. I'm so grateful for the ways that our church has really pressed in creative ways to continue ministry in this time. And as Dr. Nate was sharing, I love process, I love plans, and it's helpful for me to see kind of ways in which we are planning things out and being careful and mindful. But I'm also learning, Sanctuary, that in this past year, as we are continuing to get to know who the Holy Spirit is and how to partner with the Spirit in ministry, I've just grown to have a greater reliance on the Spirit, to not always know exactly what will come, but yet be mindful to trust in this season, to trust in the Spirit, that the Spirit is still working, the Spirit is still moving, and good ministry can still happen in this season. So I just want to encourage you that ministry is still happening, and even in these various phases, we'll continue to do good, relevant, and needed practical ministry in North Minneapolis. So as Dr. Nate shared, we are in a season where, for example, life groups are continuing to meet in a short-term session for the summer, and they'll continue in the fall. So I really want to encourage everyone to sign up for a life group. These are tangible ways that we can stay connected with each other, that we can fight some of the isolation that happens in this time, in ways that we can continue to grow as disciples of Jesus. Also, I just want to encourage you and know that the whole staff team is thinking of ways that we can do creative and good ministry within these phases. And so, for example, Tara is continuing to think with her team around how we might have Mosaic small groups, since we won't be able to have Mosaic on a full-scale youth group for quite a while. And so I'm excited to see just the ways in which ministry continues even in this season. Then I want to invite you, Sanctuary, to pray for our team. Pray for this task force as we continue to make plans and to implement them as a church. And also, I want you to know that we are conducting a congregational survey because, again, we want your thoughts and your feedback in this process. And so as you receive the email for this My Church Gathering link, you'll also find a link there for this congregational survey. So please take time to complete that. It's short, but it has very tangible, informative information for our team and our church. And then finally, if you have any questions, because I'm sure this brings up a lot of questions for everyone, please feel free to share that with the elder board. We're asking all questions for the My Church Gathering are directed to the email elders@sanctuarycov.org. And if they're not able to answer the question, they'll certainly pass it on to our task force, and we'll be happy to answer any questions you have and be mindful of the current concerns that you're holding. So thank you so much for taking time to hear what our task force is up to, and know that we will continue to share updates along the journey together. So Dr. Nate, thank you also for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you again, Pastor Rose, and God bless everyone.